You are listening to Talk to Seattle, and I am your host, Jason Rigdon. Before we get to our guest, I just want to remind you that if you want to be on the show, or if you want to suggest a guest for the show, please just email me, jasonrigdon@gmail.com.
I'm Joe Kunzler, private citizen, open government, advocate, photographer, somewhat of an author, I guess, but I'm also asking that the state legislature pass in ESHB 1329, which is the open government bill, that will renovate the Public Meetings Act 50 years on. And I really hope that we will have online meetings in some way after the pandemic, or at least those that need to call in from home can do so, and those that want to watch can do so.
Can you tell us a little bit about, why this bill is needed?
We need, House Bill 1329, because it's a renovation of Open Public Meetings Act 50 years on, focused on accessibility. 50 years ago, we had email and ARPANET. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have social media. We certainly didn't have Zoom. We didn't have podcasts. We had radio programs that were rarely, if ever, recorded. We didn't have, I don't know about Seattle Channel per se, but we didn't have a lot of public access TV like we do today with C-SPAN, TVW, Seattle Channel, King County, TV, and all of that. And, and then we had the tragic pandemic hit a year ago, and all of a sudden Governor Inslee and his team, and I, negotiated, abridging the Public Meetings Act so people didn't have to meet in person. And I thought, as somebody who takes transit, hour after hour to do research and go and then slide into a public meet, or go to a photo shoot and slide into a public meeting and then go back to a photo shoot. It's really, really nice what the governor's done so far, but a lot of people do not support this per se. And so we really do need ESHB 1329. We need the bill. We need, to make sure that we have the right of public comment. And this is, of course, coming from someone whose last interview criticized a repeat abuser of public comment, so that people can give quality public input to governmental bodies about policies that matter to them, and also guarantee that, if feasible, government bodies that provide oral public comment can provide a remote option like phone calls or video conferencing. But the bill also does a few other fixes, and basically sets basically we're rewiring the building and putting in some plugins as well. But we require why an executive session was called be put in the minutes, because the public should know why the public was excluded. We encourage but do not require recordings of public meetings. This was a huge point of contention with the local government lobby, because it's an additional cost, and not every city government is Seattle. Not every county is King County. But with all these apps and all these smartphones, because again, 50 years ago, we had phones that were the size of a brick or two. You had to pick it up, put it, the handset in, you had to dial in the numbers, and it had a cord to the wall. Now you have a phone that you fit in the palm of your hand. You can call anybody, and you can even have apps that allow you to have a phone that goes to your computer and your cell phone. So, you can do it's just amazing what technology's done in 50 years. And to that end, again, this bill also encourages, but does not require remote access, because one, some people were really frightened at the thought of permanent online meetings, and also because the technology costs of hybrid meetings can be a bit much. And then finally, as part of what I call the 6 angelic details, we give this bill the alternative name of the Hedger Newsbrook PhD Act. Renaming the Open Public Meetings Act after her is only fair. She's a University of Washington alumni. She had an internship at the state legislature. and then took that internship to get jobs in the Carolinas and then Great Britain, where she exposed British politicians abusing expenses and basically took it to the British Supreme Court and won. There was a huge outcry in 2019 over it, and it has arguably begun a reckoning in Great Britain of politics that's still rippling 10 plus years later. And I think it's a great way to honor women on Women's History Month. I think it's a great way to honor a top gun of open government who got over 100 British national politicians called MPs or members of parliament to quit or resign because they didn't like the transparency. And, I just think it's a great way, to honor a hero while we've got this opportunity. I also did it because a state legislator, I won't say who, wanted to put my name on the bill. And I'm like, who the heck am I to Dr. Brooke? Come on. We should name it after, somebody who's a top gun, not somebody who wants to be a top gun.
So we've been using this, these remote meetings for a bit now during this pandemic. How has that experience been for folks?
It's, frankly, people who are committed to civility and openness, it's great. State legislature, I've seen a few faux pas and some stumbling around just on the bit I've seen, but most local governments doing quite well. Council President Gonzalez and her staff at Seattle City Hall have done an absolutely outstanding job. And although that job has nothing to do with being mayor, I fully endorse Council President Marina Gonzalez for mayor. Because if that's what she wants to do, she should go get it. Because I think if she applies the same tenacity of protecting the Commons as council member and council president to being mayor, she's going to do great things. But that's about all I'm going to get involved in Seattle politics, because a good friend of mine lost, and I'm still sour about it, and I don't want to cast aspersions on who defeated her.
So who is there anybody opposing this bill, and why are they opposing it?
There's a few Republicans, and they're opposed because they don't think these regulations are necessary. They think that they're a bit burdensome. They have bought into the concern trolling of the local government lobby, like the Association of Counties, the Washington Association of Cities. And here's the thing with these associations that I find insidious. Our taxes pay for that. Our local governments pay dues to these organizations to lobby our legislators. It would be like, and then they lobby against things that we citizens want. So we citizens are basically paying for both sides of this debate. And I don't think that's fair or right.
And so these local governments, they're worried about, is it just like the technological and maybe a financial burden of having to record these things?
That's the biggest concern they have. And also some individual electeds, some of whom I'm acquainted with, want to go back to in-person meetings. There's some that, there was one local government lobbyist that worried, that just wanted to give deference to in-person attendance. And I'm like, no, we need to have an online option for accessibility. We also need to reduce carbon emissions. I mean, here it is. My acquaintance, Senator Liz Lovelet, is trying to price carbon and reduce emissions through a tax. And yet this bill will reduce commuting emissions significantly. And yet, there are some that want to oppose simple regulations of government that could allow people to attend meetings at home and speak from home and reduce emissions that way. For the record, I support Senator Lovelet's pricing carbon bill as well, but I'm just trying to make a point.
Could you tell us a little bit about the people that are benefiting from these remote meetings? There's a lot of people who haven't actually been able to attend maybe these meetings, but now can.
I think that, these remote meetings are awesome because you now, instead of spending hour after hour after hour on public transit, don't get me wrong, I love public transit, but the time commitment gets onerous. It's basically become a de facto mute button. When I have to decide between 4 hours of travel for 2 minutes of public comment at a transit board, or not attending. Most of the time, I would decide not to attend one transit board in particular. Others, I could make it work. But I'm someone that likes to advocate for more transit, more service. I would also add as well that working families are now able to speak. People of color are able to speak to these meetings. People are able to, use their cell phones to call in on the road. And I think that's such an important feature to keep, so we can have more diverse voices than the usual crowd you see at City Hall. Working people, small business people, versus paid activists and people on disability. And nothing, I'm not trying to single anybody out or start a fight on your show, but we do need to, we need to, I will put it this way and single a few people out. We need to make sure that when we're out of this pandemic, that at a bare minimum, an absolute bare minimum, public comment is not dominated by the half a dozen or so habitual public commenters that show up in around Seattle, not just certain Alex, but Queen Pearl, and then there's a few others, and I think that those voices need to be replaced by average people that just want their 2 minutes of say.
Trying to think about how to put this question and not be rude to some elected people. I don't mean it rudely, but it just seems like maybe some elected folks don't really respect public comment. Maybe like it seems like there'd be more of a motivation to want to hear the public and do whatever you can to get the public's input.
I think there are some who do discount public comment. I think there are some who do that, and I find that concerning. But I'm I mean, I just think that this bill will enshrine the right to be heard, and I think that being on record against something is important. I think being on record for something is important, and I think being able to speak up and be heard is vital.
And if people want to show their support for this bill, how should they go about doing that?
You can go to and I'll email you the link, bit.ly/email1329, goes right to a web form to talk to your state legislators. That's bit.ly/email1329, goes right to a form to talk to your state senators and say, hey, I support the right of public comment, the right of being heard.
And is there anything else being done? I think we talked briefly about, the some of the local governments being concerned about maybe the cost burden. Is there any kind of a desire at the state level maybe to help those places maybe afford the equipment that they're worried about?
To be honest, I'm not aware of any financial attempts, but because of the lack of financial aid, certain things are being encouraged, not required. And I think that's fair. I don't, I made clear when I talk to people about this bill, I'm not out to get local governments. I'm well aware that most local governments do not have a Seattle channel, okay. And, most local governments and regional governments are, they don't have the resources of Sound Transit. They don't have a live stream account. So there needs to be a balance. And I think encouraging is only going to help. I think it's going to help push the conversation. It's going to help fight innovation, and those that are elected to serve, that want public comment, like King County Councilmember Claudia Badass-Ucci, who has repeatedly came out in support of remote testimony at Sound Transit, who has reported, who's tried to strike a balance between real public input, and Alex Zimmerman has done an incredible job, by the way. People like that we need more of.
So you are kind of, an expert on these public meetings, it seems. I mean, you've taught me a lot about them. Is there anything I should have asked you that maybe I missed about this bill?
But, this is a bill that really is a renovation 50 years on. It's a bill that I wish was stronger, but the local government lobby has friends like Representative Gaynor, a Republican, who were ready to kill this bill of amendments and kill the clock. I'm going to write a book about all of this, and then I'm going to give you a preview copy, and hopefully it'll come out this November, December timeframe, because I want to tell the story of how we got here, because what I've seen so far out of Olympia really should make people stop and think. I mean, we're having a national conversation about the filibuster. We need to have a state conversation about the Olympia de facto Olympia filibuster. We need to have a conversation about is it okay that we have a local government lobby that is paid for by taxpayers and then tries to kill transparency legislation? Is that okay? I mean, is that something that is it just me that feels like that's a problem? Because it might be, and I'm a big boy and I know I'm ideological and I can let it go. And also I want to read in the record one of the experiences I had in Olympia, and I found it's out the worst way possible. You cannot have props and even a background with a Dr. Brooke newspaper quote is a prop. And the quote I used that got me,
Really?
yeah, really. Quote I used was, "Getting information is only the beginning. Transparency in government must be accompanied by the public's right to be heard and to influence government policy. The first objective is to get the facts, for without facts we are powerless to oppose government decisions or bring about change. The next step is to open up the decision-making process so we finally have a government accountable to those it serves. This should be our right and not a privilege." End quote.
And they wouldn't let you have that behind you?
Right. I had to take it down and I replaced it with a community transit bus photo and explain what was going on.
So if you, theoretically, if you had a magic wand and you could make this kind of bill be whatever you wanted, what are the kind of pie in the sky improvements you'd like to see?
If I could, if this was a bill that didn't have to worry about an Olympia filibuster and the local government lobby, I would require model rules on open meetings from the state attorney general. New York State has them. And if we have extra time, I will bring up why I brought up New York State. But New York State has this set of model rules. I just found out this morning. Another thing I would add to this bill would be making, mandatory, at least remote access through a telephone or a speakerphone, because clerks have phones. They can just put the phone on the table and hit the mute button. I mean, granted, most clerks do a lot of hard, smart work, but this is incredibly easy. And another thing I do is I just say, it's only a few $100s to get a camcorder, stick it on a tripod or a cheap tripod. I mean, it go for $15, so $215. You put the damn thing in, then when you're done, you put the memory card in the computer and you upload it to YouTube, and you say it's unedited as is. I mean, that's what the sweet little town of Coopville, Washington's been doing, and they don't have that many people, and they were doing it before the pandemic. And I'm like, if we can't do that, come on. I mean, transparency, at least letting the public see the deliberations is better. Not just for the people who depend on transit like me, but for working families, so that we have informed comments. The public needs to use facts and information, not emotion.
And you said you wanted to talk a little bit about the rules and maybe laws in New York and how they relate to this.
Well, I've got a friend of mine in Lindsay Boylan who's been caught up in a pretty bad situation with her former boss, Andy Cuomo. So I was, I hope that Andy Cuomo does resign. But how does it to do with this? Nothing and almost nothing, but it's just really, really important that we get this bill passed and we honor women and we platform, more women. And I'm a guy. I'm not changing my gender. Thank you very much. But I think women are great, and I think that on Women's History Month, getting this bill passed and naming the public meeting sector for a woman is just a small token of real appreciation, not some corny rose on Valentine's Day like creepy Andy, but actually doing something that's going to mean something, and allow since since majority of caregivers are women, this is also going to help them be able to participate from home, and maybe they'll hear and see what goes on in government, say, hey, I want to make a positive change and run for office. So this is all about inclusion, and that's why I brought up New York. Why I was researching New York, because I think that the New York City Council needs to call an emergency meeting and call on Andy Cuomo to resign for his misconduct. So that's how it all ties together. I'm sorry I went on a bit of roundabout on that one.
No, it's quite all right. If people want to support this bill or just find more information about it, how should they go about that?
bit.ly/email 1329. I'll email you the link, and also there's another bit.ly to the bill, but I just want to make it as easy as I can for people to comment and on one location, get in there, quick comment saying, hey, I want public comment and I want to be able to testify online, and call it good, because we really need to put people first in our democracy and not just certain trolls. I think our officials need to hear from people who work, people who play, people who have a life outside of politics, as well as people like me who have a life too much around politics.
Thank you so much for your time and your efforts on this. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
I don't know. At this point, I've got separate social media channels or separate interests. So yeah, I trust you in that regard.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll make sure I have some links in the show notes for folks to learn more about you and stuff. And I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, one last thing. This really builds on Tackling Tsimerman, a book I wrote, about dealing with him and his outbursts and all of that. This came out in December 2019. It's on Kindle. I'm willing to cut the price the week that this show airs, kind of give people a bit of incentive to get Kindle, because I will eventually update it to at least right before the pandemic and the proclamations hit, and then the new book I'm writing will go from there to whatever happens with this bill, because I really think people need to understand where we're going and how we got here. Because I am just absolutely eyes wide open at what I'm seeing in Olympia, and I'm like, we need to ask ourselves some fundamental questions as Washington State citizens about our democracy, and that's not to insult anyone. You may know I didn't name a single single local government lobbyist. I don't want to make this personal. I just want this to be about the issues, not personalities.
Well, once again, thank you so much for your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch.
You've been listening to Talk to Seattle, and I've been your host, Jason Rigdon. If you'd like more information about this show or our guests, please visit talktoseattle.com. Our theme music for this episode has been Lobby Time by Kevin MacLeod and is used under the filmmusic.io standard license. Thank you for listening.